everybody? I'm Zenith Warrior Princess, the cutest of ghost buns, and welcome back once again to the Disney debate. We are not dead. We are live. We are back with a brand new rap. We're ready to discuss a brand new set of films that we dub The Emperor's New Remake. But before we get into that, how's it going, Kat?
I live! Yes, it is great to be back again. Great to be back on the Disney debate. I am so happy and I am excited because we are talking about Cinderella and I get to watch how much you're going to rage about it. So yeah, I'm enjoying myself so far.
And Mr. Duke, how's it going?
Oi, how you doing, Zane? What's up? How's Bob's your uncle and Cinderella?
Why are you British? Why am I
Uh, be- be-
British?
yeah, because we's the Disney thing, right? We're French or American, but now we have to speak with the Queen's tongue.
But we're in France.
And their own
Yeah, the
business.
British will have it soon enough.
Before we get into all of that, so today begins a block of films that we like to call The Emperor's New Remake. For the longest time, we didn't have like a certain structure for our Disney debate, but over time we kind of moved it to where we would discuss the original film and then the sequels and then the remakes. However, in our time doing the show, there are some that we just didn't get around to doing for one reason or another. Either it was before we came up with this idea, or it was because we had a 2-year hiatus because of the human malware. Speaking of the human malware, the reason why this episode is a little bit late is because for the past 2 weeks, I had the human malware, and I didn't have a voice.
See, that's what you get
So
for partying
it's
so hard, Zen.
Hear my voice.
I think it's because of school. I think, I don't think it was because I went out. Like, I went out once to a gay bar, but I was honestly feeling a little bit sick beforehand. So I think it was just, something that's going around at school because a lot of people are getting it. In any case, I got the human malware. I had to rest for 2 weeks. But in that 2 weeks, I had time. I had time to rewatch all 3 of the previous Cinderella films that we've covered on the show, and I wanted to do that because the thing with these remakes is that they're defined in the Disney terms not by how good they are individually, but by what they change from the original films. These are live action remakes, and a lot of them are just unnecessary, as we saw with The Lion King, where, what does this film add? What does this film bring to the table? And part of why I wanted to do this was I hadn't seen Cinderella 2015. I wanted to see what does this bring to the table. But then again, also it's just I wanted to see why this was really necessary because this went under the radar and we've had so many Cinderella films over the years. I mean, just on Disney Plus, there's the 3 animated films. There's the Brandy version, and the 2015 version isn't even on Disney Plus. But there's a bunch of other Cinderella movies, like the Hilary Duff one and whatnot. So I wanted to see how it compared to the others. But before we get into that, let's talk initial thoughts on just the remake status in general of Cinderella 2015. Kat, what were your initial thoughts when like this popped up?
Honestly, I was kind of hopeful because the thing is, Cinderella was kind of like at the beginning of this whole live action phase. So there wasn't that whole dread yet that, oh, they're going to ruin it and yada, yada, yada. Plus, considering all the issues with the original Cinderella, in my opinion, like, there was so many, like, upgrades and fixes and stuff they could apply to this that would make it better. And honestly, like, it seems pretty hard to ruin Cinderella given what a simple story it is. So I actually did have hopes for this. And, when I went to the theaters, I left not feeling mad. So that is a testament to something at least. And you know, because given that I do love the Cinderella movies. Like I thought, you know, initially I thought it was like, oh, it could be good, but it could also honor the legacy. So I mean, as to whether it fully did that, I guess we'll just get to that later.
Yeah, it's one of those things where like I was hopeful, but like it looked pretty, but that's all I really got from the trailers. Doug, what do you think?
So, let's see. I think in 2014, we had Maleficent come out,
Oh God,
which
I forgot about that.
Oh, was that before Cinderella?
so that was before
Oh
Cinderella.
God.
So I remember it was the first film to come out after Frozen, and I was afraid that they were gonna do like the whole, sisterly platonic love trope that you know, Frozen had just done. Like they just wanted to copy that success, and they kind of
Right.
did, the same sort of beat for beat thing. Um, and I remember, yeah, we did not care for it. Um, and then, what you call it, later in 2014, we had Into the Woods adapted into a film at last. Um, so by 2015, just a few months after Into the Woods came out, first off, you've already had Into the Woods come out with a Cinderella story as like a major component in it. Plus, Into the Woods was live action. So it was like, do we really need this? I remember we saw it, and I didn't really have very high hopes. But it did exceed expectations. It was, not that bad. Um, it was pretty harmless. There were a few things that I felt, they did a little better than in the original animated feature. Um, but I mean, honestly, it's probably like one of the few good live action remakes, but I think the bar for that is so incredibly low. So I don't know if I'm really saying much.
Now that you mentioned it, yeah, like Maleficent, as we said in our major podcast, and unfortunately, I'm gonna have to rewatch that film before we discuss the sequel to that because it's been a while and I forget some of the badness. But like we had this bad film, and then I like the Into the Woods adaptation. It's not perfect, but I thought it was actually pretty well done. So it's like you have this 1-2 punch, but then you're right. We had Cinderella in Into the Woods. So why would you do Cinderella right after that? So it's like you already have this environment of why is this here? Um, but now let's get into the actual like Cinderella films because another reason I rewatched them was because I wanted to see if our original thoughts and reviews held up because those were like what 10 years ago.
Mhm.
Um, we've been doing this for a while, and I wanted to see if maybe I was too harsh on some of them. Um, my opinion has only changed for the original Cinderella, and here's the thing. I had a hard time sitting through the original Cinderella for this review. I tried 3 different days, and twice I was just having trouble paying attention to it. It might have been because I was starting to be sick, but like I was just having an issue. And then the third day when I watched it, I'm just like, this is good. I can't say it's bad, but like the original Cinderella strikes to me as very fluffy. It's very padded. It has a lot of Tom and Jerry sequences, and there's not a lot that there's not a lot that really matters in the first half of the film until you start getting to like the ball bits, and it does a good job of setting up the dilemma with the sisters and whatnot, but like there's so much with the mice, there's so much that isn't about Cinderella that like there are parts that I just checked out. But the music is good and it's enjoyable. It is still a classic. It's just I found a lot of it just boring. Do you want to weigh in on this, Cat?
I mean, I, I might be biased just because this is a movie I grew up with. One of the few movies I was allowed to watch. So I watched it like over and over again. I had the typical little girl dream of, one day I would find a fairy godmother who would like suddenly make me beautiful, and I'd go to the ball and I'd find a prince and so on and so forth. So it kind of indulged in my personal fantasy. So watching it again as an adult, I definitely see more of the flaws that you pointed out, and I definitely agree with them. But at the same time, I still like it for what it is. Like, it's a simple fluff piece, and it's a fairy tale, and I love fairy tales. So there's so it's really hard for me to be overly critical of it because it is a classic, and for something of its time, it's really incredibly well done animation wise. But I can see
Yeah.
how someone who this type of work isn't made for, or someone who doesn't really care for fairy tales or simple fluff pieces would be put off by it.
And it's like I don't think it's bad. I like a lot of it. But while I think the animation is amazing for the mice and the animals, the humans and the backgrounds do stick out on an HD TV. They weren't a problem at the time because you probably couldn't notice this, but I could definitely tell the difference. And so it's like there's some things that I think haven't aged as well personally, but I'm watching the Disney Plus version. I think they took the Cinderella Blu-ray version for that.
Yeah, that would make
Um
sense.
which it shows all the flaws. That's what Blu-ray does. It shows more detail, and if it's an older film, it sometimes shows the flaws. Doug?
I remember watching it as a kid. Um, I remember it, it's a pretty decent movie. It, still holds up today. Obviously, there are some things about it that, haven't quite aged well, but on the whole, it's a solid movie. It's a classic as far as Disney's concerned. Um, as far as the animation is concerned, particularly with like the dress transformation scene, uh, the dress transformation scene in the original animated film is iconic. Like, I remember as a kid seeing toy commercials for like the Cinderella and Disney Princess stuff, and they would show that dress transformation as part of the commercial. So then you have the live action version, and the CGI just does not do a good job of, recapturing the lightning in a bottle. It has nowhere near the same effect. Nowhere, it just comes off kind of dull.
Yeah, I do agree with that. Like, it is a very whimsical film, and so like the fluff, if you're a kid, like you don't mind it because it's the point is just to have these comedic moments to distract you from the stuff that's going on. Like, I discussed this way back when I did the standalone review of Snow White. Essentially, it was created during the Depression, and they needed any sort of distraction, anything from the death that was around them. So it's just like anything whimsical. They didn't see it in a critical light like we do today. They're just like, this is entertaining, and I think that's what Cinderella does well. All right, Cinderella 2. I watched this, and I wish I hadn't. Um, I watched Cinderella 2 as part of the marathon the day after Cinderella, and it is just as bad as I remember. I thought I was being too harsh in the review, but no, it's bad. It is really bad. It simply isn't done.
What do you expect
The
for a
the
straight to DVD movie, especially during the dark age of Disney? Well, I was gonna say the second dark age.
it the second Dark Age. It is one of those films that is exactly as bad as you remember, and the only like semi good part is the stuff with Anastasia, but it makes no sense when you compare it to Cinderella, like the actual Cinderella movie, because like why would she be helping Anastasia? Because like she did all this to you and you just want to help her out of the kindness of your heart. Okay. Like there's a lot of things that to me don't really make a lot of sense. And Cinderella 3 apparently takes place before that segment, but then at the end they don't go back to the same time frame. But like, I don't know. This is like the time scale is really weird in these films.
I think we can just
So it's
assume
like,
that Cinderella 2 has been officially retconned by 3, so it ultimately doesn't matter in the grand scheme of things.
but since Cinderella 2 came out, they had to use the 3 title. Okay.
But we don't talk about Cinderella 2 dreams come true. No, no.
That's stretching.
God, Cinderella 2 is bad. Like, there's 2 really bad segments, and there's an okay segment with Anastasia that a lot of people really like, and I do like it too. But 1 segment out of 3 is not really good, you know.
No, I agree with
Is-
that. Honestly, this
So
felt more
it's
like it
like-
was setting up for like an unaired pilot or something, because it's kind of what they did with the Atlantis movie. But
Yeah, it does feel like that. It's like let's set up a television show that never went anywhere. So we can all agree that Cinderella 2 is worse than Cinderella 1, right?
Yep.
well, clearly,
Bottom of the barrel.
yeah. Honestly, like the Anastasia bit really is the only good part. And here's the thing: I should not know this movie as well as I do. Like, don't get me wrong, I hated this movie. I had no reason to watch it multiple times. But my sister, who is also a Disney fan but has way less standards than I do, used to watch it over and over again. And it was mostly because she liked the
Oh.
Anastasia bit. So and since we had shared a room, I had no choice but to, put up with it. Hence why I can still remember a lot of that stuff from memory, and I wish I didn't. But even so, like I said, I do give them kudos for attempting to redeem Anastasia, which I guess they kind of do, or at least have her move away from her toxic mother. And it kind of sets up for what happens with her whole arc in Cinderella 3. So I guess you can at least say that it did a good job setting that up with the payoff. I don't know, like, I mean, that's probably the only positive I could take away from it.
Yeah, like there's just so many sequences of what the hell, like it simply isn't done. The prune stuff, like the tradition, and it's like, why do you do this stuff if like no one likes it, and why is the king upset about having commoners if he has a friend who's a commoner? Like, none of this makes sense. And then the stuff about Gus wanting to be human makes no sense, and it just like there's just a lot of really bad stuff in that aside from the Anastasia bit. Doug, do you have anything to add?
I've spent the last decade trying to repress any memories of that film, aside from the "it simply isn't done" joke that we keep telling. I saw it once. That was more than enough.
It simply isn't done. We simply don't rewatch this. Now we come to Cinderella 3, and once again, I have the same opinion. I am surprised and proud to say that this is the best Cinderella film that I have viewed. And that's including Cinderella 2015. Cinderella 3: A Twist in Time has no business slapping as hard as it does, but is so good.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. Like, they did not need to put that much effort into that film, but I guess after the reaction of the second movie, and with people now voicing how, the original Cinderella was, like, apparently bad and sent a bad message to girls and yada, 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 they decided, well, you know what? We're going to undo some aspects, and we're going to make it the best damn Cinderella story ever. And they accomplished it, so kudos.
The interesting thing to me is that the budget for Cinderella 2 was 5 million and the budget for Cinderella 3 was 8 million. It's not that different when you consider how, the budget for films are, but the animation's so much better. The story, the characterization, everything is just so much more improved. And like, you see some of the shots and I'm like, is this a Cinderella movie or a Sinbad movie? Like, there's a gif going around of Cinderella going to the ship, and it cuts to Sinbad, and you can't tell the difference.
No, I think I've seen that too, that you're talking about, like how interchangeable they are, and that's really a testament to how good the animation is in the third one.
Yeah, and it's just like it's better animation. They give the prince a lot to do. The prince is amazing. Like there's another gif where the prince jumps out the window and says, "Okay."
I love the videos that like show that and be like the prince out of context, and it's just him leaping out the window.
It's amazing what they are able to do with this character now. The prince is a fleshed out character, and he's not just choosing her for like, he actively cares for her. They make the king into a better character because like they show that his wife was not so different from Cinderella or like Anastasia, like more of a commoner vibe from her, and it kind of explains a lot of Cinderella too in that regard, and how like she was uncoordinated, she trod on his foot, but he loved her, and he values like romance more than he lets on in the first film. It's really good. So you have all of this really good stuff that this adds. It fleshes out Anastasia and how like she doesn't want to go along with her sisters and her stepmother, but like she has to because that's the way she was raised. And like there are things that this movie does right, especially the demonic Lucifer and the carriage bit. Like they actively give not only the prince but like Cinderella stuff to do, and it's really damn amazing. Doug, do you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, no, definitely, comparing that with Cinderella 2, it's like Cinderella 2 is the cheap cash grab, and then Cinderella 3, it feels like there's actual effort and, dare I say, love in there. Um, like, yeah, the animation stepped up. We're actually putting more effort into, trying to redeem Anastasia. We even go so far as to like have her, wearing the glass slippers, dancing and like clacking loudly, with that to, demonstrate how not good she is at dancing, that it really like makes such a sound. It's kind of amazing, you can actually recall more from that, from like these little touches, like you said, you actually have more stakes, more of justification for Cinderella and the prince to be together, for, them to find each other, other than just, oh, we danced and I was, enamored and I went looking for you. It's like, no, they actually like legit getting a whole, thing to try and overcome. It's like, and the stepmother's putting a spell on, and you're like, I mean, it takes itself seriously, but it also has fun too, which is more than I can say for the movie we don't speak about.
Yeah, and there's a sense of they really did care. Even the songs, which I don't think are as good as the original film, the songs still rock, and they still had fun with them. And it's like they're clearly trying to replicate some of the success of, say like the Renaissance period, and they don't quite get there, but like it is big and epic in scope for the songs that Cinderella is singing, and it really has this sense of wonder to it that I'm just like, yeah, the time scale makes no sense because it's been a year since they've been in the castle, and they don't reference anything for Cinderella 2, but then Anastasia's nice in this one, so it kind of like ignores Cinderella 2, but at the end they don't go back to the same time frame. But like just as its own movie, I love it. I love it. Anything else before we move on?
They did technically reference the second movie in the end credits, because I think they show like, these little pictures in the credits, and one of them is Anastasia and the baker that she has the crush on. So I mean, there is that, but that's really all that needs to be there, honestly.
I think that was the only thing that went through people's minds when this movie came out was, if they're undoing everything, does that mean they undo her relationship with the baker as well? And I guess it still happens regardless, just, they probably meet a different way. Like, they probably meet sooner and on better terms because, she doesn't have to go through her mother in order to, like, date him.
Yeah, and that's the one thing I was worried about, but it does seem like, because I looked on the wiki, and I'm just like, because I was trying to figure this out, I was a little bit confused, and it said they said it takes like Cinderella 2 takes place, most of it takes place before 3 because of the time gap, but the Anastasia bit takes place afterwards regardless of the continuity. So I guess that's how it is. I mean, we do see Prudence in Cinderella 3, and she's a little bit better than she was in that movie. So it's like, I guess so. That's the only really weird thing, but I still say Cinderella 3 is the best Cinderella film.
Hell
Would you
yeah.
agree?
Mhm.
Hmm.
Definitely.
It doesn't have to go that extra mile, but it did, and it's appreciated.
And from the reactions I got of my live tweeting of that movie, a lot of people do agree. If you agree, say so in the comments. That's why we're here. But like a lot of people really do love it. I mean, it's the one movie that has gifts for a reason. Um, now that's all out of the way. We can talk about Cinderella 2015 and part of the reason too that I wanted to do this is because I wanted to spend a lot of time talking about the previous films because I don't have as much to say about Cinderella 2015 that I did for the others because like there are some good things that it does and I don't want to discredit that, and we're going to get into a few things, but like a lot of the things is bland compared to what they did in the previous films, and if you compare it feels so lesser by comparison. Um, Kat, why don't you give like a brief overview of this? I know it's Cinderella, but like
Right.
just give a brief overview of the remake.
Yeah, so Cinderella 2015 is basically like the original 1950 Cinderella, but with a few differences. So you have Cinderella, we see her with her parents, both her parents when they were alive. However, we of course have to kill them both off through, Disney parental suicide syndrome, because that's the way Disney does. So yeah, both her parents end up dying. She's left with her stepmother and stepsisters. We actually see the progression of her stepmother turning her into a servant and her basically losing, you know, everything, like, bleh. And basically watch her lose, like, all authority and like status in her own home. Like we see that she loses her friends and her servants. We see that she loses her bedroom. She's not allowed to eat at the table anymore. So it's a slow progression over like a short period of time. Um, but we do get to see other stuff. We see Cinderella actually meeting the prince before the ball happens. We get to see the prince and how his life is back at the palace before his father declares there's going to be a ball to find him a suitable princess. And then, of course, the rest of the story is mostly goes how it does in the original. Like I said, a few subtle differences here and there, but honestly, some of them are rather significant, and we will address it going character by character as well as into the overall story changes and such.
Yeah. I'm gonna say the good before I get into the bad. There are some good additions. All right. I like that they bring up how her name used to be Ella, and they called her Cinderella because she had cinders from the fireplace. No other version of this tale does that, and we finally get an explanation. I like that. Um,
I agree as well,
I
because it always felt weird to me in the original how her name was just automatically Cinderella, and I'm like, what kind of parent would name their child that? Like, without the
yeah.
context of, like, the character. So, yeah, I was really glad that they explained it and say that, oh, yeah, her name actually is just Ella, but, they added on to it as an insult.
I do like that she meets the prince beforehand and that she owns the farm, so she's out riding and she meets the prince and he's enamored by her, not based on status, but just from her personality, and I like that. I like that, she has more agency in this film. Like it is her farm, it is like her setup in that case. So they do a good job to kind of try to give Cinderella more agency in this film. Do you have anything to add to that, Doug, before I get into the bad stuff?
Oh no, I mean that's pretty much the same opinion that I have. That yeah, we were kind of lacking that her her namesake being that, oh, she was Ella, and that she, was sleeping in front of the fireplace, got cinders on her, so they, as a derogatory means, they called her Cinderella. Um, Definitely helps to meet the prince beforehand, so we establish a little character on that and establish some relationship between them, other than, oh, they danced, they were enamored, that's all. So yeah, I completely agree on that.
Okay, and there are some positives that I'll get into later to do with the prince, but we'll save that for the character. Now let's talk about the negatives. If I'm going to be honest, I think this is padded way worse than the original film. This is padded, and there's so much that is unnecessary, and they keep going back to this. What's the phrase?
Have
Cat.
courage and be kind.
Kind.
Have courage and be kind, because it starts with the mother who has plot contrivance disease, telling her have courage and be kind, and she does the cliche of she's walking and then she just falls, and like it's it felt so contrived at that point. I was just like, and there's so many things that were just like that, where like, we have the father trying to take care of the daughter, and it's like they take so long with it, and I get that they wanted to improve on, waiting for him to remarry, but a large portion of the film is just like, hey, let's wait and wait and wait until she's more of an adult, and then have him remarry, and it felt like padding to me. I don't know, Kat, what do you think?
Well, I will say for certain this is a typical Kenneth Branagh film because I've seen quite a couple of his things, and one thing that I notice is a big trend in all of them. He takes forever with the first act of the movie. Like no matter what movie it is, it takes forever, at least a
Yeah,
minimum
yeah.
half hour to get things started. And I could see what he was trying to do with this, showing the family, showing, where she got her morals and convictions from, and like the whole setup, kind of like what they did in the movie Ever After. Uh, but yeah, I do agree that like after a while, it did feel like it was going on a bit too long. And from what I heard, it actually was even longer, and they had to chop off like at least 10 minutes or so just to like
Oh my
streamline it a little
god.
more.
Get on with it.
Hmm.
Like that's how I felt with like the thing as is. I was so I like one of the big issues that I have too is that they all have British accents, even though this movie is supposed to take place in France. I looked it up. Cinderella is supposed to take place in France, so they have all these British accents, and I'm like, okay. And then you have all this padding to start us off, and I was just annoyed from the beginning. And then her father dies of, his father remarries.
Of expendable
Her father
character
remarries.
syndrome.
Yeah,
Yeah.
her father remarries, and then he dies while going on for his job. I think they said collecting tribute, but like he's on the road all the time, and then he gets sick on the road, and so
It felt like they
I
wanted
guess.
to write Beauty and the Beast, because like he goes out on a journey and the stepsister's asking for things, and Cinderella is just simply asking for a branch that touches his shoulder.
Yeah, and it's just like I get what they're trying to go for with this opening, but I just didn't feel any of this, Doug.
Yeah. So there's a significant difference, obviously, between the original Cinderella from the 50s and this one. That being a our character introduction is done through narration in the animated film, and we kind of just jump to the current situation with Cinderella and her stepsisters, whereas obviously this, as you said, is so padded with, establishing Cinderella's mother, establishing her father, establishing how the stepmother and stepsisters came into her life, and how the father died out. So already, yeah, we're taking way too much time into that. And the other thing is, the original movie was a musical. So
Exactly.
yeah, we're completely missing that almost in the live action. It's like maybe if anything they'll play like a bit of the songs in the background, but you know that's just entirely missing from the live action.
Aside from they have this nursery rhyme that got stuck in my head, and I hated it because it's such a bad song. It's like it's like the Twinkle Twinkle Little Star of the movie. It's like, but like she sings it as like a bookend from the beginning, and then when she's in trouble at the end, and it's just like it, it doesn't have any presence. It's not good, but it gets stuck in your head because it's catchy with its tune. That's it.
I mean, if you say so. I honestly, like, I knew about the song at the end, but I guess I missed it at the beginning, but I don't remember a damn word of that. I just
Mm-mm.
remember thinking when she does sing it, I'm like, wait, when did we suddenly have music in this? I thought this was a music-free Cinderella. Like, what? Why is this suddenly a plot point? It just,
It comes out of nowhere. They set it up, yeah, but like it doesn't feel like it feels like it was forced into the movie because no other point do they have this really like this tune. But even then, it's not good. It's like even Cinderella 3 tried to go hard with their songs.
yeah, it's
Um,
disappointing, and I kind of wish this was a bit of a musical. I mean, they could have done it easily. I get they were probably trying to go for, a more serious take, but even so, like, it could have, like, added the whimsy a bit just to add at least a song or two. I mean, if they could do it in Jungle Book, they certainly could have done it in this.
while we're on the subject of presentation, before we move on to the rest of the story, I will say this much: the movie visually is very pretty. The costume deserves like some sort of award. I don't know if it got anything,
It was
but
nominated. That's because the costume designer, Sandy Powell, she's a three-time Academy Award-winning costume designer. So definitely the highlight of all this was the costumes. And again, it's a Kenneth Branagh film. They always go hard with their costumes because they want everything, the cinematography and all that, to be popping, to look like really brilliant and eye-catching. So they definitely went all in on this. And actually, funny thing, I was looking up trivia for this film, and a majority of the things I found were actually about the costumes. So, and some of it actually is interesting too. Like, what was it? The material they made Cinderella's dress out of, like, it looks heavy, but it actually is like made of a really lightweight material. It's just like, padded a lot, and it's actually made of blue and purple colors to give it a more deep hue. And because they didn't want to make it fully CGI, to make it sparkle, they sewed over 10,000 Swarovski crystals into it, like both in her dress, in her hair, and in her shoes. Um, and was
and it looks stunning. It looks really good.
hmm Yeah, and like was it for the Fairy Godmother, they actually sewed LED lights into her dress so that would light up whenever she cast a spell. And what else? One thing I will note though, the glass slippers obviously were CGI. Like they had like actual glass slipper props, but they weren't actual shoes. Like nobody could like put them on or anything. So the ones we do see Cinderella wearing were just completely CGI, which makes sense because who could possibly walk around in those things and not like be screaming in pain? Like I don't care what the godmother said. Those
You
look
will
like the most
find they are quite comfortable.
those look like the
No.
most. Those look like the most like heel destroying like shoes ever in existence. Like I can't imagine how anybody could fit their feet into one of those in real life. And apparently, like they made they made 8 different versions of this dress too, because they had to either lengthen it or shorten it depending on the scene and everything. The poor actress though, they had to. She's already skinny, and they had to put like a corset on her just to make her even skinnier. So a lot of people thought that like in the poster promo, they thought they CGI'd her to look really thin, but no, she actually does look like that way with the corset. Which I'm like,
Yeah,
how do you even put up with that?
corsets were a thing. Corsets were bad, and it's like they weren't as bad as like Pirates makes fun of them, but like they weren't as bad as they make them out to be. It just they make you look skinny.
Right. If they're done correctly, I guess they can be comfortable, but still, I can only imagine. Oh, and apparently, I heard at one point during one of the photo shoots, because again, as I mentioned, the dress was made of very lightweight material. They were taking pictures of Cinderella. She happened to be standing near a heater, and her dress actually caught fire from the heat. But she was
It's a
okay.
Madonna.
Yeah,
A Madonna gaff.
like she was okay, don't get me wrong, but I just find that funny. She's supposed to be posing and looking all whimsical in her beautiful magical dress, and all of a sudden, fire.
Another interesting thing, not kind of related, but like Zendaya dressed up in the Cinderella dress.
Yeah,
And
for Coachella.
for Coachella, and I saw it. I'm just like, oh my god, this is so good. So like Cinderella is this film is a lot about the visuals. Like I love how it looks. The ball looks so amazing visually. It's so good. But there's so many things that I found bland, and we're gonna get to the climax. But a large portion of the beginning and middle for me was just visuals. Doug, do you have anything to add to that?
We're talking about the dress right now.
We're talking about visuals.
I didn't really find the visuals to be very stunning, to be honest. I felt everything seemed either like muted or just not very impressive. I mean, what you call it? The dress transformation scene in the animated movie is iconic. You have, like I remember seeing as a kid commercials for like that Disney put out for toys, and they'd show like the Cinderella dress transformation, as an introduction to that sort of thing. So it's like that thing is just it's beautiful. It's eye catching. I remember the dress transformation scene in the 2015 was just so underwhelming. Just like it's this very CGI blinky thing, but it
You're
just
right.
doesn't have the
Yeah,
same effect whatsoever.
I will admit
it's
that. Sorry.
go on.
I will admit that, as beautiful as the visuals are and the costumes and everything, the thing that really ruins it is the CGI in this. On the one hand, like I said, it made the glass slippers look real pretty, but it's obviously CGI. In fact, everything that is CGI looks CGI. Like I said, the whole dress transformation was a whole CGI fest. If the CGI when the animals are being transformed is like atrocious, especially those lizard footmen. God, that was like the worst CGI moment of the guy eating the fly. I'm like, really? Really?
Yeah, like I will go on record in saying that the practical side of things, the dresses, the look, the feel of the ball, like that, those are all great. But then you get to the CGI, the pumpkin, like it looks so bad, and you get to certain points with the lizard with the teeth and the goose and the CGI dress transformation is horrible, and it's just like I don't want to hate the dress, but like it's just pretty colors in front of a green screen. Woo! Doug, do you have anything to add before I move on?
Yeah, no, the CGI. I feel like that is the massive problem with a lot of these live action remakes, and more, adding to my, saying that it just robs it of the whimsy of any of these live action remakes. It's like, at least with the animation, it's like it's consistent. There's effort in it. There's, it looks pleasing with the rest of the film, whereas the CGI just feels like it's taking you out so much. I think the worst culprit for me was the dress transformation in the 2017 Beauty and the Beast, because it's like that sequence just I can't even describe. Obviously, we'll talk more about it when we hit that, but I think it was just the most underwhelming thing ever.
That's part of the problem with the remakes. It's like you can tell that they want to try to improve upon them, but they insist on all these CGI and all these things that don't really add to the film. And then we get to like the climax where like the dress ripping is so underwhelming in the climax. Like
Oh
it was
yeah,
a thing in the original film.
that was awful, how they did
Yeah.
that. I mean, first of all, they already took away from it because they had Cinderella do her meltdown after her stepmother wouldn't let her eat with them at the table, making her realize that she's fully become a servant. So that's already happened, so it's not as impactful when, the dress thing happens, because it's not like they promised she could go only to redact and then destroy her dress on top of that. But also, all they did was just rip it slightly. It was like nothing. Like, you can easily just take a needle and thread to it and it would have been fine. It's not like in the original where the two sisters are just tearing off shreds and like whole like segments of the dress, making it so that she had nothing but like a little torn frock afterwards. Like, that scene to me as a kid was traumatic. Like, really traumatic. So, and it makes it
It's one
all.
of the best scenes in the movie.
Yeah,
They
it
went
makes it.
hard in the animation on that one. Yeah.
Yes, it was just so awful, and you could feel how upset she was and everything. Like, because it's not only was this her mother's dress, but the mice all like risked their lives and worked really hard just to make it for her so she could go, and it was all just destroyed. So that would, when she does have her breakdown, it made it all the more impactful. But yeah, they really botched it in the live action version.
And then we get to the fairy godmother. Now, they were really trying to be Beauty and the Beast with this because she has her meltdown, she goes outside, and she sees a woman in distress and like, hey, can you spare some water or some milk? And then she gives some milk, and that's why she helps her out. Now, on the one hand, I get it. I get the whole point of this. It's like, an act of kindness is rewarded with kindness. And that's the point of Beauty and the Beast. But that wasn't in Cinderella. And I feel it's kind of. It's not really built up too well. It's like it comes out of nowhere. And I think it's an interesting scene. But then she transforms into a beautiful woman. And we have crazy antics. I don't like the fairy godmother in this. But before we get to that, Kat, what do you think of the intro?
I will say the whole setup with her, testing Cinderella, actually reminded me of another fairy tale. I forgot what it was called, but the premise was that there were these two daughters. One was good, one was bad, and the mother was bad as well. And they made it was a Cinderella type situation too, where the girl was made into their servant. So the good daughter goes to a well to retrieve water, and a witch comes by in disguise and asks for a drink. She gives it to her, so as a reward for her kindness, she makes it so that whenever the girl speaks, she spits out jewels. And that's like what leads to her meeting a prince and getting her happily ever after. And then in a reverse, when the mother finds out about this, she sends the bad daughter to do the same thing in hopes of meeting the witch again. Except in that case, the bad daughter doesn't give her a drink of water and insults her, so the witch curses her so that whenever she speaks, bugs and snakes flies out of her mouth. So that's what that kind of reminded me of in that sense. But
And yeah, it's very fairy tale, and I get that. I like these types of sequences. It worked in Beauty and the Beast. I just feel like there's no intro.
like I said, I think it was to test to see that after she's, been brought down to her lowest point, would she still be kind? I think that was the big test and everything that this was trying to reference. Like, I would like to think that she would have helped her regardless, because, in the original, the fairy godmother showed up and said that, if you had lost all your faith, then I wouldn't be here. Proving that even at her lowest point, she still deep down was hoping for, like, some sort of magical solution to help her. So, like, she had like some sort of faith that, if she kept being good, she will be rewarded for it. So I don't know. It's kind of weird in both takes, honestly. Uh,
Um, Doug, any thoughts?
Yeah, no, like we said, it feels very much more like the Enchantress from Beauty and the Beast. I didn't think godparents had sort of any, strings attached to, granting wishes or not. I felt like, they're sort of these parental guardian figures, so, why would they have some, shouldn't they have unconditional love and granting of these wishes versus some random enchantress or witch or something that's not bound by that?
I mean, it's kind of bad in a sense when you think about it in both versions, because it's like, if the fairy godmother is supposed to be watching over her, why did she do nothing these like however long period of time that she was being abused and forced into servitude? Like, why didn't she
Yeah.
do anything then?
Yeah.
Why did she wait until, like, oh, she wanted to go to a ball, and then like she kind of just like she did the equivalent of like an aunt showing up and just handing her a 20 and be like, oh, here's money for a cab, you can go to the party now. That's pretty much what she does in this. And yeah, I get it's what sets off her path into meeting the prince and then getting her happily ever after, but at the same time, it doesn't excuse the fact that she just stood aside all this time and let Cinderella be horribly treated. Like, I could see if she was just a stranger passing by and she happened to see her and then looked into her heart and then, she decided to help. But if she's like the fairy godmother, usually those are assigned to kids at birth, like in most fairy tales. So the fact that she kind of just did nothing until this point is kind of sketchy.
This is why I like Ella Enchanted, the book, not the movie. Ella Enchanted in the book is it establishes that the fairy godmother is not as helpful, and the reason why, like, a lot of the thing, they can do little things, but they can't do everything,
Mm-hmm.
and it does a better job of illustrating that point to me of why the fairy godmother's there. They're there to let's help out, but we can't do much more than little feats of magic, because big feats of magic results in people being miserable. So, that's what I like about Ella Enchanted, and this one doesn't really help in that case.
Yeah, I
Um,
I watched that movie too, so I totally agree with that concept. It's just the fairy godmother is the whole like, crux, the whole turn point of how Cinderella is able to do any of this and get her happily ever after. I mean, it's not like the Brothers Grimm version where she just happened to hide a dress and she would sneak off on her own to the ball. Like, they decided to like go with the French version, which has the fairy godmother. So yeah, it's like that's kind of like an important figure point, and you really gotta like do it well to pull it off properly. Like, even I think the Brandy version had like the fairy godmother kind of looking over her, but in disguise as like an old peddler woman. So she was there, but she couldn't exactly do anything until like the time was right. So
and like that's the thing. But then again, if it's the French version, why are they British? Why do I have this outrageous accent?
I couldn't tell you. I really couldn't. I guess it was just easier that way given the cast, but one thing I did want to point out that I found rather interesting, because I had been wondering why exactly they chose Helena Bonham Carter as the fairy godmother, because it seemed like a bit of an odd choice to me, given who, like, how the original was. So I looked it up, and it's actually like a nice tribute to the original fairy godmother. So yeah, the original fairy godmother was voiced by Verna Felton. She not only voiced the fairy godmother, she also voiced the Queen of Hearts in Alice in Wonderland. And if you look recently, Helena Bonham Carter plays both the fairy godmother and the Queen of Hearts in the Alice in Wonderland sequel. So
Oh,
it's
okay.
so real clever what they did there.
Yeah. Real like, we're not gonna get too deep into the characters, but let's talk a little bit about the fairy godmother and then the climax. I The fairy godmother in this is really bad. Like, she nearly kills Cinderella with a pumpkin, and like, she's just quirky for the sake of being quirky and absent-minded, and I don't like that at all. Like, I was bored by the movie up until this point, and then this happened. I was just staring at the screen like, what am I watching?
I know the fact that she has trouble turning a pumpkin into a coach, the fact that she didn't think to bring it outside before transforming it, nearly killed Cinderella and herself and the mice. Like, jeez. Is this her first, like, assignment or something? God.
And I know that the fairy godmother in the original was supposed to be absent-minded a little bit, but not to this extent. And they're trying to make this point like the whimsical point, and just it comes out of nowhere. It feels like weird. And then the only part that I really liked was, I can't drive, I'm a goose, because that stuck with me. That's funny. But like, other than that, this whole sequence, I was just, my jaw was on the floor because I'm like, I didn't know how to feel. Doug, do you have anything?
Yeah. Um, I'm with you. The I mean, like, Helena Barbara Carter's not in there very long with the Fairy Godmother character, but in that time, she manages to make everybody cringe. She's quirky, she babbles. It's like, excuse me, she's having trouble with, casting the spell. It's like, yeah, the original Fairy Godmother was a little quirky and, had a little issues with the spell, but it's like she's a little more endearing than that, and she uses her time wisely. We almost kind of want to see a little bit more of her, but she doesn't, she leaves enough of an impact where we get enough of what we need. Whereas Helena Bonham Carter, even though she's not on very long, it feels like she's on for much longer than she is.
Yeah. So we'll get to the characters in a little bit, but that was my thing. It's just that whole sequence took me out of the movie, and then we get to the ball. The ball sequence was actually, I thought, pretty good. They do a good job. They reference Secret Garden with the little thing that doesn't come back for some reason. And then we have the climax where like they go all over, and the Duke in this one is the evil one, who is consorting behind the king's back because the king in this version dies. The prince is now the king, and so the Duke is just like, well, we have to have you marry a princess, even though it was your father's wishes that you marry who you wanted, who you love, and so
Can I just say the king
Duke,
just suddenly gets stricken down, like he's fine during the night of the ball, but then all of a sudden, like the next day, he's on his deathbed.
Well, yeah.
everyone dies in this film.
Well, anyone who's a parent dies. Like, mostly, I should say. But yeah, the point is he lasted way too long for a Disney parent, so he had to bite it at some point.
And I get it, like, they had a doctor show up and they said he was terminally ill, which is the reason why they held the ball in the first place. But it's just like, he out of nowhere, he's dying. And I'm just like, okay. So the prince becomes the king, and the Duke goes behind his back. And so, like, he consorts with the evil stepmother to have them marry somebody else in order to give the other sisters a royal marriage of a lord or someone instead of Cinderella. And so they have the climax where they go all over to try to find the one who fits the slipper. And the climax is infuriating because Cinderella gives up. And it's up to the mice to open the window while she's singing, and the prince is actually among the group secretly, and hears the singing and goes personally. And it's like, this does more for the prince, and I like it, and we'll get to that when we get to the prince, but why is Cinderella just giving up?
Yeah, that was definitely a down point for me, because, like, the stepmother locks her in the room, just like in the original, but she kind of just, like, accepts her fate. Like, I guess she didn't know about the whole shoe fitting thing going on or whatever, or, like, the whole, like, whoever fits the shoe becomes, like, queen or whatever. But the fact that she just, like, is like, okay, I guess this is my life now. I guess I'll just twirl around and sing. Yeah, that was infuriating. And it also feels like it was, like, the only, like, reason to give the mice to do something. Because honestly, aside from them being turned into horses, they really do nothing to this film. They don't really add to it either, other than be someone that Cinderella can talk to. So,
Yeah, like, yeah, they don't talk in this version. Like, they have her pretend that the animals, like, are there and talking, and it's like, so, like, it's more her active imagination, which doesn't work out. Like, it just doesn't make sense to me. A lot of these changes just feel so bland for Cinderella, and this climax really got me. Like, no.
Yeah, the fact that they had to, like, Deus Ex Machina, like, her voice just to make it so that they didn't drive away without, like, finding her, like, that was, like, convenience of conveniences. Like, really? Because, like, at least, like, in the original, at least, the mice were able to, like, get the key, and she was able to free herself in time before the Duke left, but yeah, that whole sequence was just so dumb. But at least the prince showed up, so that was a good thing.
They make the prince better in this film. Like, we'll get to the prince, but like he has some of the best moments. Doug, what are your thoughts on this climax?
Oh, where do I even start? Um, so let's see. She spends all this time, with the prince and everything, and then it gets to be midnight, and it's, oh, I gotta go, can't wait. Stops it for the king and like does this whole speech to him. It's like, oh, your son is the nicest guy, is way perfect person. Takes time to stop. Takes her sweet time when she's got no time, but she's got enough time to talk to the king, and then do the whole steps of the palace thing where she drops the shoe and da 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 da. It's like, okay, why? And then yeah, she's sort of. I wouldn't say necessarily that she's resigned to her fate, but she's like, I think she has some sort of self-esteem issue where it's like she is content that she got to do this one thing, and this will be like the story she gets to tell, even though there is a chance that she would have romantic, attachment to the prince. She doesn't bother to follow up on that or anything. She's just like, this happened. I'm happy. I'm just gonna go back to life as, being the slave to my step parent, my stepmother. Blah blah blah. And then yeah, it's like the father's like, oh, that was a nice speech she gave. Sure would be a dick move if I died right now.
I mean, I guess it must have been a good speech if it changed his mind about, oh, I decided since I'm dying, you can marry for love now.
So yeah, the climax is bad, and there's just a lot of things that I don't like. But also the fact that she forgives the evil stepmother at the end. For no reason, she's just like, I forgive you. And then she storms off. And we're going to get into the evil stepmother later. But, like, as someone who has been a victim of gaslighting, as someone who has been abused by a parent, by someone they know, by friends, like, forgiveness doesn't come that easy. And I get that there's this whole thing about, oh, well, forgiveness is the first step. No, the first thing that I wanted to do was forget that it happened for a while, heal, and then maybe, like, I don't necessarily want revenge. I just wanted to forget that I was abused, and that didn't sit right with me at all.
I mean, I kind of agree too. I mean, they kind of did this in the Brandy version too, but the Brandy version, she was like so sickeningly sweet. It kind of made sense that she would forgive her step parent, like, despite whatever she went through. With this one, like, she does. This Cinderella actually does tell off her stepmother, saying, "You will never be my mother." That was a good moment, after she was trying so hard to, like, make them her family and everything, for her to finally reject them for the assholes they are, only for her to then turn around and be like, "Oh yeah, and by the way, I forgive you." It's like, why? You're not required to forgive them. And I get it, she's probably never going to see them again, so she probably thinks, oh well, maybe later on, once I get over this, then I can seek forgiveness. But it's like, no, you don't owe them forgiveness. Like, you shouldn't have to say anything. You can just leave. You already told her off. You had your good moment. Just leave the place behind and go to your happily ever after. Don't give these people any more shreds of kindness. So yeah, I totally agree. It was really frustrating at that point.
Doug?
Yeah, I mean, basically what you said, I think it's that playing into that whole, have courage and be kind thing. It's like they want to show in that last moment that even then she's kind, she's the bigger person, how much better she is than her stepmother. Um, so yeah, but yeah, that was one thing I never understood with the especially the second, Cinderella movie is like, why would you even maintain any sort of relationship with these people? You never have to see them again.
Like it doesn't make sense to me. And again, I'm speaking as someone who's been a victim of abuse. I've been stalked. I've been harassed. I've been gaslighted by exes, and I don't want to have anything to do with them again. That's me. That's my prerogative.
Plus,
I don't want
sorry, go ahead. Go ahead.
I don't want to put them on blast. I don't want revenge. I just don't want to see them.
Get them out of your life. Wash your hands of them. Never talk of them again.
And plus, even if she does have the mind to like maybe seek forgiveness later, like that's later. Like she could easily just leave, live her life or whatever, and maybe years down the road when she comes to term with everything, if she decides she wants to forgive, just send them a letter. Just saying like, "Oh, hey, letting you know things are going great for me and also that I forgive you for all the awful stuff you put me through. I hope you have a good life." They could have done that later, because honestly, to truly forgive someone, that takes time. And
It
yeah,
does.
like her stepmother just locked her in her room, broke her slipper, and was, keeping her from the person she loved. So, and for her to just suddenly turn around and be like, "Oh yeah, I forgive you for doing all that because it all turned out well." Like, really? You're not gonna think on that a little bit? Just a little? So,
Well,
yeah.
I
Like
there was that instance where the stepmother finds the slipper, and then she talks to Cinderella, telling her, I had a husband, then he died, and then I got another husband, and he died, but he had this, girl that meant so much more to him than I did to him. So it's still, her whole jealousy aspect. So I guess there is that sort of pity to her character.
I guess, but like also speaking as someone who I had people in grade school who bullied me, and I eventually forgave them, but that it took me years, and meeting them later and just and seeing them in person and them apologizing, like it takes time for forgiveness. And we're gonna get to the stepmothers thing in a minute, and yeah, the pity thing, but it doesn't work for me.
Yeah, it just feels like, they're saying, like, "Oh, you should always forgive, no matter how horrible the person is to you, because that makes you the better person." It's like, no, you're not required to. And even if you do, it takes time. So, yeah. Like, screw that ending. Screw that ending. Let's never talk about that ending again.
All right. Let's start with the villains first because I have the least to say about them. Let's go to the characters. Let's start with Anastasia and Drizella. They're there in this version. They left no impression on me, and they're just kind of awkward. I no, Kat.
Yeah, my problem with them is that on the one hand, they're convincing as sisters given how they argue and bicker and whatnot. And they definitely come across as obnoxious and untalented, basically how they are in the original. The problem is their design. I don't understand the costume design, the makeup, the hair, and all that, because like they basically look like twins. And I don't know if Anastasia and Gisela were supposed to be twins in the original, if one was older than the other, but at least they were distinctive, like visual wise. You knew who Drizella was. You knew who Anastasia was, even in the voice. But these two, they're basically clones with slightly different dress colors. So yeah, there's like nothing to stand up. I can't even tell you who is who, honestly. And actually,
Yeah, and they
go ahead.
they just don't leave that impression for individuals.
And actually, a little funny bit I learned. Apparently, Lily James, who plays Cinderella, initially tried out to be Anastasia, and also Lily James is on. So yeah, Lily James is also on Downton Abbey, and actually so is Sophie McShera, who plays Drizella. Except on that show, their statuses are reversed. Lily James plays the aristocrat, while Sophie McShera actually plays a peasant servant girl. So
Huh.
rather funny twist in casting in that regard.
That's interesting, and I get kind of why they did that. It just Anastasia and Drizel in this version didn't do anything for me. And it's like, yeah, they play the part of sisters really well, but they're so, like, bland to me. Doug?
There's this one thing that they do that made me crazy because it's like they don't really ultimately do anything with it, and that's like they catch her, talking with the mice. They catch Cinderella talking with the mice, and they're like convinced that she's crazy, whatever. Which, okay, that that would be good if you actually, did something on it. Maybe use that to your advantage. Maybe when, the prince is coming, be like, oh no, she's crazy. She talks to mice. Why would you want her? Something like that. If they delivered on that, then yeah, I'd be all for it. But aside from that, like you said, they ultimately do nothing with it, and they're just kind of there. They, I guess, they kind of try to make. I guess it's Anastasia. Have her little redemption at the end. But who cares? They certainly didn't really have that much in the way of character development.
Nobody got any
Yeah.
foot parts chopped off. 0 out of 10.
I found them wholly bland. And if I want to be honest, I do not like what they did with the stepmother. Now, I'm going to say the good. The stepmother is well acted. I think she does a good job of playing kind but devious. The problem is, I don't think they get her jealousy across at all until the very end. And it's just like, I didn't understand in this version why she did a lot of these things until the end. And then she says, oh, well, like, what if you had a husband who died and then another husband who died and he loved you more than anything? Well, they didn't set that up. And then it's like, why are you so mean? It's like, because you're just so kind. And I'm just like, if you're gonna make her just be evil, just make her evil. Like, you were going somewhere and then you stopped, and it infuriates me with this version because I don't want to hate the actress because I think she does a good job.
Well, it's Kate
But
Blanchett, of course.
it's the character is so not fleshed out, and they didn't go with either or. If you're going to go with I just hate you because you're kind, fine, I would go with that. But then they were going the sympathetic route, and just like, no, I don't like this character. I don't like this version. The original is so much better. Kat?
Um, the thing is, like, with the stepmother, you're really playing with two different versions here. So, like, with the original Wicked Stepmother, it was her cruel nature was only revealed after the father died. And because Cinderella was just a child and had nobody else to look out for her, this person who has been cruel through and through and only cared for her own daughters, she was able to basically like go on a power trip for, let's say, like 10 years or so. So, she was basically just indulging in her sadistic pleasures with this young girl that she was stuck with. So, she probably just wanted to enjoy the guy's wealth, but, had no choice but to take on this ward that she didn't wanted. And yeah, like she was fascinating in that, you could see how calculating she was and how like skilled she was and how she like manipulated and tortured Cinderella, like, promising her, saying to her that, oh, well, you can go to the ball if you get your chores done in time, and only to give her like, heap upon heap of chores, hoping she wouldn't have time to make her dress, only to then redact that later on and have her daughters tear things up while she just watches on cruelly. And it's the same thing later when she figures out that Cinderella was the one who the prince met at the ball, and then she like subtly locks her in and tries to make it so that her daughters are the ones that go in her place. So it was like she's kind of like a Bond villain in that sense, very like secretive and manipulative. Like unless you're like really looking, like you can't tell right away that she's evil. Like obviously Cinderella can, but if you were an outsider, you couldn't tell. This stepmother, I kind of disagree what you said about seeing the progression, because we do see in the beginning that she and the father get together, and then she kind of turns this place into like party central. like, I guess, throwing parties like she was used to back in her old place. But the father doesn't like that, and she happens to overhear him saying how, oh, I'm having such a difficult time living with her and the daughters. I had a much better time with you, Cinderella, and your mother. So I can see where the resentment comes from that, being the second wife and everything. But then, like, once he dies and pretty much, leaves her alone again with this girl that she obviously did not want it to be any part of, at this point, she's just seeing, okay, how can I manipulate this situation to kind of get her out of my way and to, like, make this place my own? Again, it's, like, really, like, it's unfortunately a slow moving thing, too, because at this point, Cinderella's an adult, so it takes time to set up to that. But once they
It
do,
takes far too long. That's part of my problem.
yeah.
It's like it's so long.
Yeah, and it really relies on Cinderella being as passive as she is in order for that to happen. Because let's face it, would any of us at that age, let's say she was like between the age of 18 and 21, would you do any of that stuff that she asked if, like, your step parent asked you to? No, right? Like,
No.
you would at least fight back when she said, oh, yeah, give my daughters your room and then you go in the attic. It's like, she doesn't even attempt to fight her on that. So, yeah, this was all her taking advantage of the situation. But then, like, she does reveal her backstory, and I kind of get where she's coming from. She married for love. She was married to the love of her life. She had children with him. Then he died abruptly. And her being a woman, back in the 1800s, that even if she was rich, like, the money wasn't going to last. She obviously had to remarry, so she remarried the guy, because he had money. But I guess she hoped that they would find love. But then once she overheard him, realized, yeah, there's no love happening. And then to be saddled with his daughter once he died, that just made things all the more worse. And of course, her just continuing to be as good as she is and everything just made the resentment all the worse. So, yeah, it's really hard to compare the two because you can see the motivation of one while seeing just the outright cruelty of the other. I guess it's all a matter of, like, who's more realistic, and I agree in the sense the original stepmother is more realistic because there are people out there that are just cruel. There are people like that who will take advantage of the situation, who will treat children horribly for no reason, and she's scary about it. Those scenes where she's, like, stroking Lucifer, or where she's, like, creeping up to Cinderella's room to lock her in, those scenes were fucking scary. Like, I always, like, freaked out as a kid. So, yeah, I definitely agree. The older version was better in a sense because by the end, like, the new stepmother, she just went all out, like, typical villain. She's like, oh, why are you so cruel? And she's like, because I'm a villain, plain and simple. So, yeah.
For me, I think it's the presentation. I understand where they're coming from, and I agree with you about the present, like, about why she's doing this. But for me, it's like they present it just not well enough, and it takes so long to get to these points, and I much prefer the original version. Also, Dipper says hi. I apologize. He's on my lap.
Hey, Dipper.
Dipper, you're a nice kitty. He just jumped on me. Doug, what do you think?
So I'm probably going to paraphrase just about everything that Kat just said because she basically took a lot of words out of my mouth. But yeah, no, there's a very night and day difference between the why am I saying the stepmother from the animated version versus the live action, and yeah, it's very much about the cruelty. Like you see the stepmother in the animated, and she's just like evil, just plain and simple. She rules by fear and by cruelty. Nothing really gets under her skin. She's, confident in everything. She knows and calculating. She knows what's going to happen, and she'll manipulate when she needs to, but she doesn't really need to because she's already got Cinderella under her finger. She, it and then you have what you call it, the slipper, and that finally gets under her skin. That's what finally makes her drop the armor a bit there. And then you have the stepmother in as Kate Blanchett in the live action, and she's not evil, but you do see a slight progression, and I remember when we first saw the movie, I said that as a positive that, okay, we actually see her, becoming the villain. When in reality, no, we don't. It's more like if the attention isn't on her, if she's not getting her way, then she has to act like a spoiled child about it. And then, obviously, she sees that Cinderella is being lavished with love and that the father only, has more affection for her and, has more love for the first mother than, his second wife. So she's a little taken aback by that. And you can kind of feel the sting from that a bit. But I feel like they make it like an overreaction for the stepmother. And then, like you said, Cinderella in this is very passive. She is a people pleaser. So it's so incredibly easy for her to manipulate Cinderella. And like you said, it takes so much longer than it really should. Like, she should kind of be pushing her, up into the attic and, not having dinner with them all in kind of the same scene. But they show this as like a progression. So that's kind of where, you think that you see that there's this transformation into the villain. But it's like, she never is really cruel. Like, she does bad things in her own self-interest, but she kind of acts like she's afraid. Like, at any minute, the rug could be pulled out from beneath her and she'll go falling. Um, and so she's, struggling and clawing to maintain. So it's like she never really had the armor that the original stepmother had. She is actually pretty easily dealt with. It's like I said, her victim is just very weak in that respect.
I can see that. That's partly why I don't like it. I understand why they try to give her vulnerabilities, and I like what they tried to do with it. It's just the presentation is so slow and and Cinderella's so passive. I don't like it.
Yeah. And that's a problem again with the live action remakes and also a lot of the stage adaptation musicals they'll do is they'll have this, you know they'll decide to make the villain sympathetic, oftentimes even making them a member of the family when they had no familiar relationship at all in the original movie. And, I mean, obviously, in this case, it's still the stepmother. She still married his father, whatever. But it's like you have like the Little Mermaid, where you have Ursula become Triton's sister. You have what you call it, the Hunchback of Notre Dame, where Frollo and Quasimodo's father were actually brothers. So
What?
yeah,
What?
yeah, that is a thing that happened.
Oh God.
The moral of the
Oh,
story:
that's
family is
stupid.
evil.
Yeah. But yeah, it's like it's getting to be a very overdone trope in these Disney live actions and the stage adaptations of just too much sympathy. Like, can't we just have somebody who's pure evil? Because there are people who are pure evil out there who have no redeeming qualities, and we should honestly see them for who they are, not always see that, oh, they might be some sympathetic person. No, not always.
There are evil people out there, and
Mm-hmm.
sometimes they're just people who are evil to be evil. And it's like,
Mm-hmm.
I like a good sympathetic villain as well, but sometimes you just want a good evil villain, and it's
Mm-hmm.
like, I think they robbed me a lot of what Lady Tremaine was, because Lady Tremaine made the just made it the original film so much more to me.
She was so terrifying. It's like you see, and it's like when in her introduction in the animated, you just see like her
Her
eyes
eyes.
covered in shadow.
Hmm.
It
The look of
That
death.
creepy voice.
And
You get none of
it's
that
so
in
good.
this.
Like honestly,
Yeah, so
honest.
it's like lesser to me.
Sorry.
Go
Um.
on.
Mhm.
y- Yeah, another thing I took issue to was how they did the whole stepmother finding out about Cinderella reveal. Because in the original, it made sense. Like, Cinderella didn't exactly have magic to disguise her. It was just by virtue of her being in, like, a new dress with her hair done and everything that nobody could recognize her. Because, let's face it, how many people have you known who look completely different when they, dress up either in costume or for, like, a wedding or something like that, as opposed to how they normally dress? Like, it happens. I,
Yeah,
I can
yeah.
buy that. Plus, it wasn't until Cinderella started being really obvious about, the prince and everything. She learns that the prince is looking for her, plans to marry her, and, like, she starts spacing out, doesn't do her work. She starts singing music that was played at the ball. Like, that instance, it makes sense how the stepmother, connected the pieces and found out that she was the one who was at the ball. That makes sense. This new one doesn't, because first off, the godmother made it so that Cinderella was being masked by magic, so her stepmother and sisters couldn't recognize her. But not only that, like when they get back that same night, the same night as the ball, and they're talking about stuff, and Cinderella's just kind of being like, "Oh, wow, that's fascinating" and stuff. The stepmother immediately suspects her, and the next day finds the slipper. I'm like, how did you leap to that conclusion exactly? Like that none of that makes
Wow.
sense.
It really doesn't, especially where she hid it in the attic and like like because she didn't find it in the original version. Like
Mhm.
there's just a lot of weird contrivances. Is there anything else you guys want to say about Lady Tremaine in this version before we move on to the royal court?
It occurred to me, Lady Tremaine in this is Karen.
Oh my god, that's why I don't like her. She
Yeah.
wants to speak to the manager.
Yes.
Um,
That's all it is. It's like I having worked in customer service, it's like I know you people. I know you. I know how it's like you want your way or else. And if nobody's willing to play ball, it's like you'll either, yell till you're blue in the face, or you'll try to play the sympathy angle, and it's like, tell me your life story. It's like, yeah, that's what Lady Tremaine is in this.
I'm gonna say briefly before we move on to the royal court. The mice have no presence in this film. They're just animated mice. They don't have any voices. Same thing with the animals. It's kind of a detriment.
I honestly think it was for the
So like,
better. Like, not to go into the whole thing, but I do think it was better because part of the big problem of the original Cinderella was they put way too much focus on the mice, whereas they should have been using it to, develop Cinderella and the prince and everything. Because it felt like they basically ran the movie. They pushed all these things to happen and stuff. Like we spent entire scenes of them simply just going to find material for her dress. And that was the whole reason why Lucifer was a big character too, because he was supposed to be, their antagonist, the whole detriment. And not only did he go like cause problems for the mice, he caused problems for Cinderella too. But in this, Lucifer's just there because he was in the original. He doesn't do anything antagonistic, even toward the mice. So on the one hand, it's
It's
yeah
just
we
fan
we
service.
yeah, like on the one hand, we lost the presence of Lucifer, who I think is a fun villain character just because of how over the top evil he is. But on the other hand, like I said, the mice were an issue because they took up way too much screen time, and in this, they're in the background like they should be. So in a way, I
I
kind of think it's
I
a positive.
I agree with that, but it's a detriment because like we miss out on certain things. Like for example, in Cinderella 3, one of the biggest parts is like the talking mice and the talking birds getting the prince, and they have the amazing scene where it's just like, but the talking mice told you. It's not you I'm worried about, it's the talking mice.
Well, it makes sense in that version. 'Even in Cinderella 3, again, they downplayed the mice and like so that, again, there wasn't entire scenes dedicated to them. They were there to help Cinderella like the characters they are. They are supporting characters. So it made sense that for them to show up in the scenes that they were present and they provided, comic relief. That was perfect for them. But like I said, they just overdid it so much in the original, and I feel like that was the intent here, was to take away all that and actually focus on Cinderella because this is Cinderella. This is not the mice.
Hmm. And we'll get to why it doesn't work when we get to Cinderella. But let's talk about the royal court. I don't have as much to say about most of them. The king, he exists and dies.
I think
He's
he
not
was
even a thing in this film.
I think he was an upgrade from the original because on the one hand, the original I think got a bit more focus, if only because he's the whole reason why the ball even happened. But in that one, he was like an angry blowhard who wanted his son to get married just because his biological grandparent clock was ticking and he wanted to see his grandkids before he passed or something. But there was no urgency. It was just him being an overbearing parent who didn't care whether or not his son wanted to get married. But in this version, the guy's dying. So he wants to make sure his son is adequately prepared and has someone before he passes. So at least he's more understandable in that sense. And furthermore, he turns it around at the end where it's like, oh, you have to marry a princess to, well, you can actually marry for love now. So I think he was better in that regard.
And I do enjoy that plot points, but for me, he was more of a non-entity. Whereas in like Cinderella 3, you have you have a better balanced version of the king, where he's sympathetic and does a lot of that stuff, and has a presence in the film.
Right, I agree. They definitely redid him better in Cinderella 3 because, again, they were trying to make up for what an awful character he was in the first. So, and they managed to do so. Like, he was still kind of gruff and, angry and stuff, but at least we saw he genuinely cared about his son and, actually did care about him marrying for love. So, yeah, Cinderella 3 did it good. I guess because in this one, they had to make it apparent that the prince had to get married, he had to find a princess, the whole traditional royalty marrying royalty thing. One thing I did.
Yeah, I think
Sorry, go ahead.
I just think for me, a portion of why I don't like it is I don't think the king needed to die for the urgency. I just think it was very contrived. But that's me. Go on.
Well, I think because they added in that whole subplot with the duke, and that's why, because the duke couldn't do that if the king was still in charge. But if the prince was suddenly in charge, he wouldn't have much agency quite yet. So the duke was trying to use his influences to get certain like alliances built. So I guess that was the only thing. But yeah, I do agree. It's kind of sucks that they had to kill him off just to make things happen. One thing I do want to point out, though, the King's actor, Derek Jacobi, I recognize him from two significant things. One, he voiced Nicodemus in The Secrets of Nim, and two,
Huh.
he played the old version of the Master from Doctor Who, like when we meet him in the David Tennant era before he becomes the newer version.
Oh, okay.
So I thought that was a little fun thing to mention.
Before finding his watch.
Yeah, before that.
Yeah. Yeah.
What do you think, Doug?
Yeah, pretty much what you said about that. It's like they're kind of there. Didn't the king in the animated version, he was like hounding the prince to give him grandchildren,
He was
Yeah.
something
Yeah.
like that. Yeah, I mean, obviously this is kind of a step up over that, but in the other hand, it's like they have that whole thing that they kind of did with Aladdin 2019, like where there's this whole other country involved that is ultimately irrelevant in the end, but serves as kind of that ticking clock thing.
Mm. Um, let's briefly talk about the Duke because that's part of my problem with the King. I don't like the Duke in this film. I don't like how they made him evil, and I don't like how it's just randomly like he's working with the stepmother, and it's like that's part of why I don't like what they did with the King and it's we don't need a second villain. You're distracting from this lady Tremaine more, and it's just like, oh, you must marry a princess. Why? Because the Spanish country, we already made the deal. Why? Why does it have to happen to strengthen the kingdom? The kingdom looks fine. I don't get it.
Yeah,
Cat?
yeah. There was no point. This guy's basically the Duke of Weaseltown. So, because
It's
like
Wesselton! Wesselton!
I know in that he's kind of like a red herring or a distractor from the main villain. In that he doesn't really need to exist. It's like, yeah, he's antagonistic in its sense, but he's not the big baddie, and he doesn't really affect things overall. So there's really no point to him. Like you could take him out and nothing would change, honestly. But I guess the whole thing was that it was to give the stepmother incentive like to hide Cinderella away because I guess maybe the Duke found out about her, but wanted to keep her away, like just to create, tension and whatnot. But yeah, it was like overly convoluted and dumb, and yeah, the Duke did not need to be evil. And the fact that they had to offset his evilness by adding in a captain of the guard, like really, like not that
Like,
I didn't like the
yeah.
captain or anything. He was fine. It's just he wasn't necessary.
I like the captain of the guard. I think he was cool. It was nice that they had diversity, and like he was a good actor and good, well done, and worked well off the prince. But like the Duke was just not needed. Doug.
Yep, I'm with you. I don't. But was that the character in the original film that had the like the black hair and the monocle and was kind of lanky?
Yeah.
Yeah, it
Yeah.
resembled nothing like him in
Yeah,
this
so
version.
I mean, honestly, it's like that character is almost a non-entity in the original movie. Like, I think he gets some stuff to do in the sequels, but
Well,
ultimately, who cares? Yeah.
well, in the original, the Duke was basically there to be both the king's punching bag as well as to carry out his every whim. Like he's the one that goes around having all the women try on the shoe, so he's necessary in that regard. But yeah, you could have easily replaced him with a prince, which they really should have. Like there was no purpose in the Duke. Like either version. So the fact that they had to invent like this whole villainous plot for this movie like really shows how superfluous he was.
Yeah, and then you have that
Yeah,
captain of the guard. He's, good, but he didn't need to exist either. Just kind of there for, like you said, diversity's sake.
and Kana agrees. Kana and Dipper agree with that. Let's talk about the prince because the prince gets the best update in this film out of anything. And I don't like a lot of these updates, but I love what they do with the prince because they make him into an actual person. And like when he's out riding, like he says that he's an apprentice in his field, like he's learning to be a prince, and it's like it shows that while he is royalty, he still doesn't feel adequate for it, and he has an arc, and he likes Cinderella for who she is, and then when it comes to it, he doesn't want to marry to strengthen the kingdom. He wants to marry for love because he believes the kingdom can be strong without this forced marriage. And he sees immediately through like Cinderella's disguise, which I was like, okay, that's good. He's like, that it's you, isn't it? And it's like, yeah, yeah, I really like this. I like the secret garden scene. I like that they behave more like people. And when the prince is hiding among the court during the slipper escapade, that was brilliant for the prince. And he's just like, when he says he'd love her even if he was a scullery maid, he's just like, he doesn't care. Like they made the prince into a much better character. Why couldn't they have done this to the rest of the cast?
Well, to be fair, he was the one in most need of an update because he was basically a non-character. He was essentially eye candy, just something that was a goal for Cinderella to obtain, like the epitome of her happily ever after. He wasn't a character in any sense. Like I said, he barely had any lines. He doesn't interact with anyone aside from Cinderella, not even his own father. He doesn't even show up to like actually, help her try on the slipper to see for himself if she's actually the one. So, like I said, he's just like a non-entity, like which sucks because this is Cinderella. The whole point is that she goes to a ball, she meets a prince, falls in love, and they live happily ever after. And the fact that they put zero effort into this guy in the original, like, is truly infuriating. Because it's like people complain about how the older princesses are so passive and barely have any lines and have barely any agency in their own movies. But if you look at the princes are treated even worse. Because again, they're like the Ken to Barbie. They're just an accessory. They're just eye candy, nothing more. So really, there was really no possible way they could have, messed up this character, no matter what they did with him in this update.
Yeah, like, and I have a hard time. It's really hard because Cinderella 3 had such a great update for the prince. I can't tell which I like more because I think the prince in this one is a more fully fleshed out character. We get his deal a little bit more, but I find the prince in Cinderella 3 a little bit more enjoyable. So I think they're about unequal. Doug, would you agree with this sentiment?
Yes, I would agree with that. I mean, honestly, in, I kind of zoned out during, the princess parts in the live action movie. But I mean, I remember him, actually having the encounter with Cinderella prior to the ball. And, and they're talking for a lot longer in the, ball scene. And, going out on the swing, whatever, having, so there's a lot more development. You see him kind of, out in the crowd and in disguise because he doesn't want to, he wants to kind of be there but not have everybody recognize him, whatever. Where the animated one had no qualms about, showing up as who he is. Um, it's kind of interesting, character wise between him and the foot soldier or the captain of the guard, excuse me. Um, there's those little touches, but on the whole, I'd agree with you. They're basically, the animated and the live action are pretty much on equal footing.
Yeah, like I definitely feel like they did where Kenneth Branagh worked in this is the added bits in the ball where they're interacting. That's where they needed to flesh out, and I think that's what worked. It's just all the other stuff that they added was just so superfluous to me,
Yeah.
and I want to like this, but I can't because so much of it is bland to me. When the prince is the best part, they did a lot of good updating, but they didn't do enough. And speaking of stuff that they did that was wrong to update, Cinderella gets a far worse. Does anyone have anything else to add about the prince before we move on?
I do, but it's mostly in regard to the actor. So Richard Madden, who plays the prince, like many people know him as Robb Stark from Game of Thrones. That's what I knew him too. First off, they did an excellent job with his makeup and stuff because I barely recognized him in this role. But
Yeah.
however, he went through hell to play this role though, because this is different than anything else he's ever done. And from what I heard, like he went through like extreme beauty regimens in order to look the part. Like they had, like he has naturally short curly hair. They had to chemically straighten it and add extensions just to give him like the hot prince look. He had to wear contacts because I guess they kept like switching between whether they wanted him to have blue eyes or like brown eyes or whatever. He also had to make him wear a jock strap because apparently he is so well endowed he kept poking out through his tight ass pants, and it was distracting both for the actors and for like the camera shots. So yeah, like the poor guy had to try on several jock straps, and one of them was so tight, like he was actually tearing up, especially the scenes where he had to ride a horse. So So yeah, he went through all that, and on top of that, he's not the best dancer, and he had a hard time when they were filming the ballroom scene, especially because he had to be really careful with the ball gown dress. Because as I mentioned before, the dress is made of very light material, but it's packed on top of each other. Apparently, there were times where the dancing was so bad, the dress actually ended up like shredded and torn between takes because he was
Oh
trying
no.
because there were times where he'd have to lift her or something, or he'd have to guide her by the waist or whatever, and the dress would just rip. So, yeah, like I said, this guy suffered hard for this role, and it sucks that he doesn't get more credit for it. And
And to be fair, the ball dance scene is really good, and for all the trouble that they had, it came out really well.
on one last little tidbit I wanted to mention, just because I found this amusing. So at the time, Lily James was actually dating Matt Smith, the doctor. At the same time, Richard Madden was dating Jenna Coleman, who plays Clara. So it's that awkward moment where your exes get together.
All right, let's talk about the Fairy Godmother, briefly, and then Cinderella, and then that should be it. Fairy Godmother, I didn't like it. I don't know what they were going for. Helena Bonham Connor is just being Helena Bonham Connor, and like, she can work. I love her as Bellatrix, but when she has to play this over the top, stupid, goofy role, like, it's just so bad to me. Like, I don't like when she has to be all this wacky comedy. I didn't like it in Les Mis. I don't like it here. What do you think, Kat?
I mean, she is kind of like a comedic actress, so I can see they were trying to utilize that aspect in a sense. But for the fairy godmother, yeah, I didn't care for it because like whereas the original godmother was like she was kind of bumbling, she was like a bumbling old biddy, but at least she could still do her magic somewhat competently. But in this case, like she almost killed Cinderella trying to like make a coach. So like I had no faith in her as like as the character she was trying to portray. And I mean, thank God she only was in it for like 10 minutes because I felt like at the end, because I know in some versions like the godmother shows up at the end and then uses her magic to reveal Cinderella as the true like person the prince was looking for. I felt like if she did that in this version, a pumpkin would just appeared and crushed her. So that's how
Like,
incompetent she was.
she had no business being as weird, and she killed her like almost twice, and it's just it really got to me, and especially when like she broke the friggin' greenhouse that they didn't set up, but like they're just really come on, like there was just so much that I did not enjoy to it that I was just no, I don't like this. I don't think this was a good casting choice. I don't. It's not that she's a bad actress. I just don't think she was cast well in the role.
Yeah, Whitney
Doug.
Houston was more convincing godmother, honestly.
Yep, no sir, I didn't like her. I mean, I pretty much said most of what I, had to say earlier on when we were talking about her introduction, etc. But yeah, no, it's like first off in the animated series, it's like in the animated film, the fairy godmother is supposed to be like coming in after all this cruelty and everything. You've just seen the dress ripped to shreds, and you see Cinderella just in tears, and the fairy godmother's kind of supposed to come in, change that tone immediately to that of something of comfort. I don't get that at all from Helena Bob Carter.
No,
I
no.
feel like she comes in hot and businesslike. She comes in disguise as a beggar woman that it's like she'll only reveal herself after she's seen this conditional thing of Cinderella still being kind, whatever. um and then yeah, it's like she cringes, she babbles, she can't do a spell correctly. And I know it's like, yeah, the original fairy godmother kind of fidgeted a bit and had a bit of trouble with the spell, but at least it's like, there's it's not really supposed to be a comedic thing, but she really tried to play it up for that, and it just so doesn't work. It feels so uncomfortable. And of course, yeah, the CGI. Why did you need to? You couldn't take the pumpkin out of the greenhouse and transform it into the carriage there. No, you had to transform it inside and let the greenhouse just shatter from the inside.
Dead, dead
uh,
several times over.
it just
Remember
never.
the scene where Anastasia gets kicked by a horse? That's what this was.
This-
It's just it's unpleasant from beginning to end. It's short, but dear God, she out overstays her welcome despite that. It
Anything else?
Yeah, and it's like, I mean, yeah, when she does it right, Helena Bonham Carter can be funny. She can be a good dramatic actor. As Bellatrix, she's great. What you call it? When she was in Les Mis, it's like, yeah, she's a little cringy, but at least the character there was supposed to be kind of like that. Was supposed to be, a little over the
Yeah, I
top
will
too.
concede I
Yeah.
don't like it, but it's supposed to be over the top.
Yeah.
Yeah.
This character, no, it just, she well overplayed it, and it just feels so disjointed from the rest of the movie.
Anything to add, Kat, before we move on to the worst?
no, I'm good. I said all I needed to say on that.
The worst part of this film for me is that they made Cinderella a bland non-entity and so much more passive than the original film. And it's like that's so hard to say because the original film she was so wishy-washy. And yeah, she does have scenes where she's like, you aren't my mother, and like she does fight back, but so much of this film is her just giving in, especially the ending. I didn't like that at all. Like, they give her a personality a little bit for, like, she doesn't like that they're hunting foxes and she's helping out. But so much of this is just like, this is a worse Cinderella for me. I did not like her, and that made the rest of the film so much harder for me because I didn't want to root for her. I don't care. I don't care what happens to this character because she's just so bland. Kat.
I have to agree too, because even though a lot of people complain about the original Cinderella being passive and whatnot, at least she had a little more personality, and at least she would like argue or try to fight back sometimes when she was being treated unfairly. But in this, it's like she just keeps giving in, all for the sake of being kind, even though it's obvious this person is taking advantage of her, and she just has bits of her life just taken away from her, just a little bit at a time, and she does nothing to stop it. And even when she gets to a point where she realizes that no matter what she does, her stepfamily's not going to accept her, she just stays anyway. She just puts up with it. Like, the thing that infuriates me the most is like or one of her friends apparently asked her, why don't you leave if they treat you so badly? And she's like, oh, well, it's my parents' house and I promised to look after it. Da, 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 da. And I'm like, really? You stay because of a house that legally you don't own, because the way the succession usually goes to like the spouse before it goes to the child, and that's if she's lucky. But yeah, the fact she sticks to that, and then at the end she leaves anyway. It's like, what was the point? None of that makes sense. And the whole thing, of course, with her being locked in the attic and not bothering to try and escape, just consigned to her fate and everything. And then her just at first telling off her stepmother and then turning around and being like, "Oh, by the way, I forgive you," and such. It just, she's just so wishy-washy, so passive. It's infuriating. Like, even when she gets to a point where she shows a flaw, like, they're so intent on making her like this just good, pure person. It's like almost nauseating.
Yeah, it's just it's too much. And as good visually as parts of the film were, like from the very beginning, I did not like this character, and it really stuck with me. And I don't think it's the actress's fault, but there are just so many problems that get to it, and I think a lot of it is the direction for me, because like the actress is trying, but it's just the character that they went with was just so non-entity and so bland. Doug.
Yeah, so I mean, I kind of tackled a lot of that when we were talking about Lady Tremaine. It's like, you can understand her, you know, staying more in the animated film because the Lady Tremaine's so much more intimidating. Like, you'd be afraid to try to disobey her, or try to escape from her, because it's like, yeah. And then like you have Lady Tremaine as Kate Blanchett, and it's like, this person is really more of a pushover. The only reason you're staying is because you care so much for your parents, and your parents told you to be kind, and your father had an affection for this woman, so you feel like, okay, there is an obligation for me to please her, but it's so not strong enough. And it's like, yeah, I mean, she doesn't really have much character going for her in either film, I think, but at least it's like you can understand more why she's as passive as she is in the animated film. And this is just like, she's just so desperate to please that it's basically killing her
Mm.
unnecessarily. Um, and there's no reason why she has to keep taking it, other than she's basically made herself a prisoner. Um, and then,
Yeah.
yeah, it's like there's maybe a
Mm,
little more, like I said, between her and the prince. There's, more interaction. We get to meet before the ball. Rather than just dancing all night, they actually talk. So yeah, in that aspect, the Cinderella in live action is better. But yeah, I mean honestly, I don't know if there's really much to talk about with her character in either film.
The last thing I want to say, I think it all comes back to the stay courage, not the
Have
have
courage.
courage, be kind.
And
It's they're trying to make this into a theme when it was never a theme, and it really doesn't work for this thing. I don't like this. I think it's you take a shot every time someone says it
mhm.
and agrees with it, and I'm just like, um,
It's like, yeah, be
personally,
have courage and be kind, but there are limits to that, and that really should be
yeah,
impressed upon more.
I,
yeah,
and I
it's yeah.
and I think a big problem too was like the time, like the amount of time that passed. Because in the original, she lost her parents when she was a child. She had no choice but to stay with this person that treated her awfully and came to expect that, that's how life was. Plus, she was probably deprived of like any, actual like education or anything that her normal parents would have afforded her, but the stepmother didn't bother with. So she had no recourse but to, stay. Plus, she probably didn't have an inheritance at that point because the parents probably didn't think to set up anything, given she was so young. But in the new one, she's basically an adult. So you would have thought by that point she would have been educated. She would have had the skill set. She would have had an inheritance to her name already, if not from her mother or from her father at the very least. But yeah, like it just felt like she created her own problems just by staying. And like I don't want to keep victim blaming because that's a big problem with the concept of Cinderella, but it really just feel like a lot of this she could have easily avoided if she was just, if she was like more confrontational and took more action instead of just, allowing this to happen.
Yeah, like I don't think I think in this version Cinderella creates a lot of her own problems, and it's because they chose to have that beginning portion where they show her as an adult, and that's a huge issue for me. Um Personally, I think this is okay. Like as a movie, I didn't hate it, but like I didn't really like it. In my rankings, the top is still Cinderella 3. Under that is Cinderella 1. And then Cinderella 2015 is just above Cinderella 2 because that was an abomination. Kat, what did you think overall and ranking?
That's basically what you said is my exact ranking. Because yeah, like you said, it is not better than the original, but it is better than Cinderella 2. Anything's better than Cinderella 2. Let's face it.
Low bar, low bar.
Low
Yeah.
bar.
Are we doing final thoughts or just we're just doing the ranking?
Yeah, let's do the ranking. So, Doug, what is your ranking?
Do I need to say anything else? It's the same as your guys.
All right. My final thoughts. This is a skip. If you want to watch it for the visuals. But like Cinderella 3, watch that instead. You really don't even need prior knowledge of Cinderella. You could just watch Cinderella 3. It's worth it. It's really good. Kat.
Yeah, this is a definitely middle of the ground. Like, don't get me wrong, I do not consider this the worst live action Disney remake that has released so far. Like, what was it? Dumbo pissed me off. Maleficent pissed me off. Aladdin pissed me off. Those I consider bad. Cinderella, like in regards to everything else that came out, I would say is leans a little more toward the good side, but that's only because it doesn't have much competition. But as a Cinderella movie, it is definitely on the poorer side. And I've seen some like real out there Cinderella adaptations. In fact, there's actually a movie on Disney Plus that aired recently that we might have to watch for our quota called Sneakerella. So I'm interested to
Oh
see how
God.
how that compares in that regard. But yeah, in terms of its being a remake of the original, it does better on certain things, but then fails on others. In terms of honoring the story, I guess some parts are more faithful than other, but overall, like it kind of doesn't work for modern sensibilities. Um, but yeah, as we all know, the best Cinderella film by far is Ever After. Like, there's no comparison. Like, come on. And I was thinking of that film the entire time I was watching this, because it seemed like they kept lifting elements from Ever After, both in regards to like showing the beginning, showing the princess meeting the prince ahead of time, how they characterized the stepmom. Like it really felt like that was what they were trying to be, but they didn't quite, hit the mark. So, like, I wouldn't say skip it. I say at least visual-wise, it's intriguing. Like, aside from the horrifying CGI bits, like I said, it's something to watch if you're genuinely curious, but not something that, avoid at all cost or your eyes will burn out of your skull.
Before I hand it over to Doug, I just do want to say there are some Cinderella films that we haven't touched upon. Obviously, the Brandy one, which people have brought up, but we don't consider it as part of the thing because, like, it's not technically Disney. It was aired on the Wonderful World of ABC, but Wonderful World of Disney. But like, I consider it more an ABC film.
It's a made-for-TV film versus, one
it's
of the film canon.
It's more based on a stage play, which technically was based on the movie, but it's an entirely different thing. There are different characters, different setups, so it's not part of this continuity. That's why we didn't count it.
And there's also like a few other ones. Like if we ever do an Elseworlds month again, I would like to talk about like the Hilary Duff version or like Ever After and stuff like that. But as of right now, this is the last one that we need to talk about for a while. Doug, what are your final thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, my thoughts were similar to what Kat was saying when we first saw it, I said, yeah, hey, it's a pretty decent remake. It's harmless. I had my issues with it, but I saw, a few more positives. But then watching it again recently, it's like a lot of those positives just went out the window, and so all I can say is it's worth a watch, but you don't need to watch it again.
Yeah, I can definitely agree with that. Like, I personally say skip it because there's better ones out there. But if you're curious, like, you can look up scenes online or, like, look up scenes on Disney Plus because there are some scenes worth seeing. I did like the ball. I did like some of the stuff. But I'm sorry to say that a lot of it just doesn't do it for me. And I thought a lot of it was really not good. That was our thoughts and our ranking. Next time, I believe, is Dumbo, if I'm correct.
Oh, God.
Yeah, we have Dumbo 2019, was it?
Yeah.
I think we saw this, like, shortly before stuff went bad. Or at least close to it.
This was like the beginning of 2019, as I recall.
Yeah, true.
Yeah,
a year
this was
before
the
things
first
went
one
bad.
that we missed.
Yeah.
And it's interesting too because like Dumbo was our second ever Disney debate. So I'm gonna rewatch the original Dumbo. Thankfully, there's not as much to rewatch, and then rewatch Dumbo 2019. But I remember not liking Dumbo 2019. I found it very bad and kind of like the changes made it worse. But we'll see when we get to that. So next time, Dumbo 2019 for the Emperor's New Remake. We have to remake everything. The Emperor demands it.
Or Tim Burton.
Or Tim Burton. With that being said, I am Zenith, Warrior Princess, the cutest of ghost buns.
And I'm Kat Macberrie.
I'm Doug Macberrie.
And I just want to remind you that when you remake a film and want to modernize things, you gotta actually make things better. You make it better, not worse. And padding, if there was padding in the original, don't add more.
More like if you're going to make something better, make everything better, not just certain parts.
With that being said, I'm Zenith Warrior Princess. Have a good one, everybody, and we'll see you for Dumbo.
Oh, God.
Owl House Shudder.